Hey everybody, Ron here. Today I will be talking about running a weekend-long D&D campaign. I did that in the summer of last year, and it was so great that I decided I'm going to do it again this year. Now I've run my share of all-nighters before, particularly when I was in college and I was younger, but the group that I played with last year and I'm playing with this year were a bunch of 40-something adults, and we have responsibilities, so there will be none of that. This weekend campaign, the one that I ran last year, the PCs started at level 14 and ended at level 18. Now, why did I do that? Because, frankly, I like to torture myself. We decided back in April of last year to do this the first weekend of July. I was excited, they were excited, and the date was set. Now, I always wanted to run the Lich Queen's Beloved, so that became the focal point of the campaign. And if you don't know what that is, it's a high-level adventure for D&D 3.5 that was printed in Dungeon Magazine 100 that could be run to conclude the Gith Yankee Incursion campaign, WotC highlighted in Dragon Magazine 309. I decided to start the campaign with a good guy assault of a fortress of the Gith Yankee captured on the PC's homeworld. Think the battle of Helm's Deep, where the bad guys are on the defense. During the 3 months before the game, MT Black released an adventure called The Lich Queen's Begotten on the DM's Guild. Perfect! Now I had a middle adventure. The adventure really is quite good. I had a problem though. The players would be overwhelmed with high-level characters. They had never played characters above 5th to 7th level, and to start them with 14th level characters was, quite frankly, insanity. So the solution to that was simple. I would run a prelude low-stakes adventure as a warm-up. And this came pretty easy. I picked up Sly Flourish's fantastic locations and found a location in there called the Fallen Palace of the Celestials. And I used that to craft an adventure around giving the paladin of the party a place to quest for his holy adventure. Because if you're going to run a high-level game with a paladin, you have to have a holy adventure. So that was set, or rather almost set. Then, just to give some people a little bit of extra practice, we ran an extra session outside of the weekend game that would make things go smoother for everyone. In June, I ran The Sky Stair of Beldistan, which is in Kobold Press's Book of Layers. And that was a great idea, I must say. They had fun, I had fun, and we learned a lot about the characters and how they worked, and now we were ready for the game. I wanted to say a little bit about high-level games. I had never run a high-level game in 5th edition before. I wanted to be as prepared as I possibly could, so what I did was I did a Google search looking for high-level advice. I follow Mike Shea, who is Sly Flourish on Twitter. He did an episode of Newbie DM's minicast, which is a 10-minute podcast, which is sadly pod-faded, but Newbie DM is still active on Twitter and doing stuff. But Mike Shea's advice boiled down to these 3 things. Don't worry so much about challenging the heroes, and let them have fun with the power. And test them first if possible when you want to gauge your power. And his third piece of advice was to cheat, to give monsters more HP. You can max out the HP. Monster HP maximum, and I found that monster HP maximum tends to be about 1.4 to 1.5 times the printed HP. So if I was in a bind, I could do the math really quick in my head. And another way you can cheat is to give the monsters more damage. Consider using double damage or maxing the damage, especially for monsters of a challenge rating of 10 plus, which in a high level game you're going to see a lot of those. And the third way is just to use more monsters. Use second wave, third waves, to give the players more of a challenge. And I thought this was good advice. And some things I saw from Reddit was, basically make the characters feel awesome. And even in hard encounters, to be sure to have fodder. Encounters should vary. Some of them should be tough, and some of them should be pretty easy, quite frankly. And then, try to keep good track of what magic the group has available, although that can be really tough because high-level characters have lots of stuff going on. And if some things just don't work for you, don't be opposed to disallowing it. Now, I didn't really have to do that, but I still think that's a good piece of advice in general. High level games stop being about can we do it, but more about should we do it. And that was some pretty good stuff. So, with all of those little bits of advice and my own experience running high level games in previous editions of D&D, I felt like I was as prepared as I possibly could be. The week before, I got some nerves, but I trusted my prep and experience with improv games to calm me down. Then that Friday at noon, we gathered and I ran the Prelude adventure based on the Fallen Palace of the Celestials, like I mentioned before. That went about as expected, with the players doing really well and adjusting to their characters. Because after all, this was the second time that they actually played these characters at 14th level. And I'm very glad I ran that session in June because it helped them and me understand how intense higher level games are. It's just like when this analogy may not mean anything to you guys, but the most important game of a football season, I played football in high school, it's the first game of the season, because the first game of the season, you work some kinks out, and the difference between your performance in the first and second game is often the best improvement. And so running that session back in June and then playing the prelude session to the actual weekend campaign on the Friday afternoon was really great. And the Paladin got his Holy Avenger. After a break for dinner, we started the campaign in earnest. The PCs did some recon on the fortress, the Githyanki forces, and their enslaved forces. Their mission was to take out the Supreme Commander, who was the Githyanki who led this incursion. If they did that, they would cut the head off the snake. They infiltrated the fortress and fought her and her lieutenants. But outside the fortress, there was a mass battle going on. I used Matt Colville's unpolished basic warfare rules. Rather, they were unpolished at the time. Now that they've been published in Strongholds of Followers. And those were a hit. The heroes beat the Supreme Commander, and the battle outside was won. Now I'm going to get into spoiler territory for the Lich Queen's Forgotten, and then later the Lich Queen's Beloved. So if you're going to play either of those, you've been warned. Saturday's play started at noon with the Lich Queen's Forgotten and the PCs at level 16. I tied Begotten and Beloved together with the premise that the Begotten is a vessel that Vlaakith was preparing to occupy for her ascension to godhood. I didn't know what they would do with the Begotten, but in the end they chose to kill her, which I understand. I didn't expect them to decide so quickly, but they did. Well, at least one player agonized about it a little bit. After Saturday's dinner break, we got into Beloved with the PCs at level 18. They did a bunch of research and prep for the infiltration of the Palace of Whispers in Tunareth, and we ended the night there after they defeated Zamkras. Sunday afternoon, we finished up the game. The players surprised me by teleporting to the area where Vlaakith was before they got the phylactery. She immediately dropped a meteor swarm on their heads. It was a fun fight, but they won, only to find out it was a simulacrum of Vlaakith they had fought. They regrouped and returned to the palace, where I had Vlaakith arrogantly taunt them the whole time. That was fun, that roleplay, actually. But, as it turns out, the session and the weekend ended in a surprising way. See, the paladin in the group was the fifth chosen of Aegis, the hero of prophecy who would save the world from a great evil. As the party was exploring the heart of the dead god Tunareth was built on and where Vlaakith hid a phylactery, the paladin communed with his god. He asked if bringing back the dead god would destroy Vlaakith. Now, I didn't give a lot of thought to this decision point, but I decided to go with it and say yes. So the player sacrificed his paladin, and that ended the game. I ruled that the dead god that Tunareth was built on was actually a good god, actually a god of healing, and the god came back to life, And so destroyed the city, destroyed Vlaakith, teleported them out of there, and that ended the game, and the players won. Like I said, it was really surprising. I didn't even know how they were going to defeat Vlaakith, but it was very entertaining for me. Now I learned a number of lessons this weekend. High-level games are hard to manage, but they're loads of fun. It's fun to roll piles of dice. The powers of the PCs and the monsters are staggeringly powerful and unpredictable, and there are lots of ways for players to circumvent the DM's challenges, but I find that stuff a lot of fun. And seeing people use those powers and all that kind of stuff. And quite frankly, I love using high-level monsters. They're great. The other thing is that people love events. They absolutely love them. I think this campaign would have felt different if we would have played a short campaign over weeks, months, or even years. Condensing the play into a weekend game for us made it something to look forward to, where a standard campaign has a greater chance to fizzle out over time. And I thought after I did it last year, I wanted to do it again, and we're going to do it again. Hopefully sometime in the future I'll give a recap, or maybe I'll do a video where I talk about my prep and what I'm going to do and everything like that. But this is definitely something that's happening this year. And this is not a new lesson, but rather this is an old lesson, something I've been doing for years as a dungeon master, a game master. The benefit of taking adventures that you like and making them your own is that you feel free to go with the flow when the players inevitably go off the rails. Pre-made adventures saves a lot of prep and saves the time of you coming up with your own stuff. And they have maps and illustrations that are ready to use. And oftentimes it's better than the stuff that you can come up with. I'm not a professional artist or a cartographer, but there are plenty of people that make maps and illustrations and write adventures for a living. And I take advantage of that stuff. Until next time, see you later.